Up first, we will have a public comment period. Nobody signed up ahead of the meeting to make public comment to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Is anyone out there in the audience live seeking to make a public comment to the committee? All right, seeing none, so that will close our public comment period. Colleagues, before I invite NDOT up here to present on the traffic calming, could I get a preliminary sense of, we have a lot of utility easements on the agenda, a couple of other items. Can I get a sense of how many items we may be wanting to pull from consent, just so I will know if this conversation with NDOT goes long, I'll be able to budget enough time for us to handle our regular business. If there's an item you have on the agenda that you'd like to pull for questions, comments, discussion, if you would please raise your hand, I'll call on you and just let me know how many or which items it is. Councilmember Evans Siegel, you recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Just number 5.
And this is not binding. If anybody decides to pull something, you can, of course, do so a little later. But right now, we've just, looks like one item we're going to pull off for discussion. So that is helpful for me as I try to plan our timing here. So I see we've got a bunch of folks from NDOT here today, and we've got y'all first on the agenda. If you would like to come up here, who's the folks who are going to be presenting, make yourself comfortable. It looks like we've got your presentation pulled up on the laptop and on the screen, and that should be coming across for the viewing audience as well. So yeah, I want to go ahead and thank NDOT for making time for this presentation. This is something that several colleagues had asked me about doing, is giving us an opportunity to review this program, provide feedback to the department, and I'm really glad that we have an opportunity to do that today. It was not easy to get this scheduled. Y'all know this is our only uncompressed council committee day in the months of January and February. So thanks again to staff for finding us time to have this discussion. So that being said, I would like to turn it over to our guests for introductions, and then you can jump in. I'm going to turn on both of those microphones. I know there's 3 of you, but if y'all can kind of share them, and if you would begin by introducing yourselves and then jump into the presentation, please.
Sounds good. Are y'all able to hear me? Sorry. Yep. Hi, my name's Chris Augustinos. I'm here with NDOT, joined by Scott Kibbe, who leads our multimodal design group, as well as Derek Hagerty, who leads our traffic group and has been very heavily involved kind of throughout our NSTC program. Today, we're going to discuss where the program has been, where it comes from, for those of you who may not be as familiar with it. We'll talk about some changes that we've been discussing, and we'll summarize those changes and kind of ask for your feedback, see if there are any things that we put forth that you have feelings about or would like clarification on. So the Neighborhood Streets Traffic Calming Program is aimed at improving the quality of life in our neighborhoods. NDOT provides measures to reduce speeding in our neighborhood streets. These are opt-in measures, so we'll discuss more of this later, but neighborhoods apply for and vote on traffic improvements. This can be all sorts of changes, including striping, speed cushions, radar feedback signs, and traffic circles. And a brief summary shows that our measures tend to be effective in reducing speeding on the streets that we plan for within our, neighborhood streets designation. Some background on the program. There was an initial attempt in 2001 to do some traffic calming with Metro. It was unpopular and it didn't return on any wide scale until 2018. When it returned, excuse me, I'm just going to grab a tissue real quick. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Sorry about that. When it returned, we started with a balloting process based on best practices that Metro found from comparable cities. And it was really helpful. It provides kind of really helpful support for these installations. The program was largely centered around neighborhood-wide projects at the time, so a group of streets clustered together, which has pros and cons. one of the complaints that is liable to come up is, parallel streets gaining cut-through traffic from drivers who avoid the traffic calmed streets. And with that in mind, being able to cover a whole neighborhood kind of prevents some of that diversion. There were some challenges and some frustrations to doing it that way with the balloting process, trying to ballot an entire neighborhood. Made it hard to move forward if there was a project that there was a lot of momentum behind, waiting for the entire neighborhood to agree on it, even if one street seemed like a clear winner, kind of created some frustration. Our program uses a bunch of different methods. Here are some of them shown. These are bulb outs, which involve striping, often kind of reinforcing crossing areas or intersections, also using flex posts. Chicanes are diversions in the road that encourage drivers to slow down and kind of make the street feel a little bit less like, a freeway and more like a neighborhood street, kind of changing the feel or the character. And street narrowing can be changing the widths of the lanes. Speed cushions are an effective tool. We install sections of rubber cushions that are laid out so that wide-axled emergency vehicles like fire trucks and ambulances are able to kind of navigate them more easily than a normal car would. And traffic circles are another option. They cause, often at intersections, drivers to yield to a slower condition. It really helps prevent T-bone collisions, for example. And radar feedback signs are another great measure, and they have the added benefit of allowing us to collect speed data, which is great. So in order to enact these changes, as I mentioned before, it is an opt-in program. And so a resident will fill out an application and get it signed by 3 fellow residents along the street. The streets that we receive twice a year in 2 different batches are scored by the kind of this methodology we have up there. So vehicular speeds, is an important quality of life consideration. Volume as well. Active transportation talks about if there are bus stop considerations, sidewalks or sidewalk gaps nearby. Trip destinations covers if there are libraries, schools, government buildings nearby that we take into account. Supplemental safety is a kind of yes or no extra 10% that any project can be bumped up. Currently, that's only the case if there's a pedestrian involved crash, but we are looking into opening that up to include bike crashes as well. So streets are scored based on that methodology, and then each window, which we have 2 of per year, the 25 highest priority are chosen. Once we've chosen our 25 streets, we share a preliminary design and kind of all of the possible methods of traffic calming with the residents at a neighborhood meeting where we collect feedback from them. Residents are given the opportunity to discuss solutions if they want to tailor it, if they have, insight on things that, may be specific to their street that need to be taken into account for revisions, or they can move on to voting after the first meeting. To summarize the program so far, we made leaps and bounds between 2023 and 2024. That is an 80% increase in our installations, which I'm really proud of. I think NDOT has done a great job with. The program overall is generally successful. We have challenges, and we're excited to look into making improvements to those. We have found that the measures are effective in reducing speeding. Again, our internal data as well as FHWA shows that traffic calming measures are effective. There's really high demand, which we're glad to hear about, but is also a double-edged sword in its own way. We had, almost 400 applications in 2024. And residents are generally really happy. We had over 1,400 votes, 80% yes, and so there is really, really strong response to this program. Some of the challenges that we're working through, again, as I said, the high demand, and that kind of goes hand in hand with educating residents as far as the sort of timeline that we're able to tackle all these projects on. I'm, again, really glad that we've made such progress in our delivery timeline and, almost doubling our output. But, it's hard to get to everything at once. We're working through a backlog, but it is still there. Another thing that comes up quite a bit is, the very few bits of negative feedback that we get, which overall are really not representative of what we see based on the results of voting, based on public opinion that we see online. The negative feedback that we do get has a tendency to catch on in a pretty inflammatory way. And so I think, that also relates to how we educate and how we talk about it. And then another one is right sizing the measures that we use. So for example, some residents are opposed to certain types of traffic calming in particular. For example, speed cushions are one of our most popular. They are really effective, but lots of residents have initial hesitation about them, and sometimes the other solutions, for example, a traffic circle, we may not have the right of way to do. And so kind of communicating and aligning the desires of what residents want with what NDOT is able to execute based on costs and geometric constraints and all that. So I'm going to hand this over to Scott now, and he'll talk about kind of where we're going from, our successes and our challenges and how we hope the program will go in the coming year.
Hello. So to give some potential updates to the program, I'm going to go through these three topics as we get deeper into them. I'll kind of give some pros and cons of what it would take to implement these. So first is a proximity evaluation. We have how it benefits of neighborhood approach, adjustments to the application and ballot process and education, and timeframe and budget. So proximity evaluations, if a street applies within the neighborhood of an existing NSTC project, it will gain a set of number of extra points in prioritization. So this kind of helps the diversionary streets whenever you have put a street or whenever you put traffic calming in a street in a neighborhood, and of course the traffic goes around it. That's designed to bring those projects to the top. So the pros of that would be addresses concerns of speeding on parallel streets. It promotes benefits of neighborhood-wide improvement without holding up an entire neighborhood in balloting. Some of the cons is it decreases the geographic diversity of installations, and some streets with higher speeds volumes may be slightly deprioritized. We conclude projects with an impact study analysis on diversionary streets through the deployment of speed feedback signs. Some of the pros of that is provides early indication for further traffic calming. It will provide information for community engagement. The cons would be primary measures of diversionary streets are not implemented in concurrence with the initial project. So we got to wait for the data to come in, implement the project once we know the full scope. It also results of the results of speed feedback signs only alert us to the need for further analysis. And this sort of shows an example of, traffic calming on one street, kind of pushing traffic to other streets and the net effect of that. So applications, ballots, and education. We have a new public input system that provides all project information for a given street on one interactive website, which aids in educating residents. We consider removing old low priority streets from our backlog, and we consider bike crashes in prioritization process. And this here is a screenshot of what the residents will see when they go to public input. It's got lots of data for their project of interest. And so the third thing is the time frame and budget. Speed of installations has improved since adding a second contractor. Staff for in-house speed cushion installation has been requested for fiscal year 2026. This will further expedite installations and decrease cost if approved. This consolidates and eliminates some application backlog. The number of streets installed up from 45 to 81, which is an 80% increase from 2023 to 2024. RFPs currently with procurement to solicit traffic calming specific installers. And this will help, of course, get more of the projects from procurement into construction and on the roads. So some areas of potential improvement, the proximity evaluations for applications near existing projects, including impact analysis on related streets. And this is just to summarize what I've already mentioned. The pros is it addresses concerns from parallel streets and provides a way to optionally establish neighborhood-wide systems. Cons, less geographic diversity per year. Some streets with higher speeds, volumes may be slightly deprioritized. And this is kind of where we open it up for Q&A, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
If you could raise your hand, I'll establish a queue. I see Horton, Ellis,
Lots of questions.
Druffel, Evan Siegel, Allen, Cash, and Coopin. All right, and after we run through this queue, we'll do another round, and if folks have additional questions, we'll get to you. So I'll go first to Vice Chair Horton. Vice Chair Horton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to NDOT for being here today for the presentation, as well as being available for questions. I have two related questions, and the first is, what tools or does NDOT have the ability to open up participation in the traffic calming process, both on the community meetings that take place, as well as the balloting process to expand participation to renters and not just property owners? There's a number of areas in my district where, we could have several hundred renters and only a couple of property owners, but it's only those property owners that are invited and are able to participate. And I want to make sure we're not valuing the safety concerns of renters any differently than we are property owners. And as a related point, a lot of times participation rates are very low in this process, and perhaps expanding participation of renters could be part of increasing engagement, but wondering if you have any other suggestions on how we can ensure that we're getting as accurate representation of the street and as wide of participation as possible in the program.
So if I may, I see Director Alarcon approach the podium during that question, so I'll go first to Director Alarcon.
Thank you very much. We do invite renters to participate in the overall conversation to make sure that we get their information about the safety concerns and we address them in the design part. As far as giving them an opportunity to vote, since they do not have the opportunity as a property owner, legal has asked us to stay with the property owner because they're the ones paying the taxes, even though it may be built into the rent and everything. They had asked that we not initiate that because it's technically someone else's property, they're renting it, but we do make sure that they're involved and invited into the conversation and included in the overall discussion. And we would hope that they would correlate that and collaborate with their landlord as far as the needs of why they want to put it forward.
Thank you to the director. And I don't think we have anyone here from legal that might be able to opine on that, do we?
No, not, but I'll be certainly happy to address it with them, but technically the taxpayer is the person that is responsible for decisions made on their roadway, so that's the approach to it. Even though they may be paying it through the rent, that's still the approach. So a lot of times you put roads down that's more renter than it is, and then somebody moves back in who's a property owner and it goes back, and legally it's the property owners that have the right to what occurs in front of that road more so than a renter. But we make sure to catch the renters and the people living in the home and in that area's concerns.
Okay. I mean, if we would like to change that, because I don't want to concede to the point that it's people's views on safety and stuff like that is related to how much they pay in taxes.
Right, but it's technically not their home, so it's really about the homeowner. But I will revisit that with legal. I have no problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, I had Councilmember Ellis.
Thank you.
Recognized.
And I don't think we ever properly thanked you all for the excellent job that you did during the recent winter storm a few months ago. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I will share that with the team that's responsible. Thank you.
Absolutely. And it came up because some of the folks, we had 2 traffic calming studies done in my district, and people were concerned that the ice or the snow plows wouldn't be able to get down with the speed bumps, but they did.
Yeah, and we had a few minor where a couple of them got pulled up, but we have new plows and we do have new folks that we're training. So it was a first for some, but we were able to get out there within the 48 hours and actually get them repaired.
Thank you. So 2 things really quick. So the first thing is the Priest Lake Drive traffic calming that was done in my district. Once the engineers had first came out and presented the plan, the initial plan, we had constituents that, or residents that gave feedback to what they wanted. And it wasn't clear with the second meeting why some of those changes were denied in that revised plan.
Right.
So what is that communication that happens between engineering, community engagement, and then NDOT?
So I think Prisley Lake was a little bit different because of the bike lanes, and that's why we're digging in a little bit deeper to understand. I do know the community overall voted in yes in favor for it, but there are some individuals who felt like things were not fleshed out enough. So we're going to actually set up a separate meeting to visit with you in the neighborhood. We want to meet with you first and then meet with the neighborhood, and we'll bring all that data as to why some of those recommendations didn't move forward. But we have been talking with our consultants and making sure that we're communicating back why we would not do something or why we would do something. And then that way they'll have a better understanding of why something doesn't get built into an overall traffic calming program.
Got it. The second thing is when it comes to like the enforcement piece of the traffic calming, at what point is it determined where speed humps or additional patrol officers on the street would be more effective than the speed humps?
So I think I'm going to turn that back over to the engineers because it is related to speed. So I'm going to turn that back over to you two.
Thank you.
And let you guys take that question because they're much better at that than I am.
Okay.
Our prioritization system looks at speeds and volumes, and we propose, like, it's our job within, NDOT multimodal design to propose a suitable design solution for that street. In some circumstances, it may be speed cushions. In situations where, like, the engineering solution isn't, necessarily a vertical measure, like a speed cushion, we do often talk to and I think provide contact information to those applying about enforcement. But Derek, unless you have kind of different thoughts on this, like, I think we kind of treat those as 2 different things that can happen, but,
Might not be past the mic. No, I think that's exactly right. The traffic calming program was really developed with MNPD to be complementary to enforcement. And just kind of ask for everyone to think of it in terms of our Vision Zero high injury network.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
All right, it's on now. Perfect. All right, now I got to remember what I said the first time around. But really, our traffic calming program was developed hand in hand with MNPD to be complementary to enforcement. And I'll ask for everyone to kind of think of it in terms of our Vision Zero high injury network. We have 200 plus miles of roadways in the county where people are dying and being seriously injured within our roadway network. So our ask of MNPD, concentrate enforcement efforts in those roadways, and the traffic calming program can go to work in these kind of lower volume residential neighborhoods where, maybe people aren't dying, being seriously injured, but there's concerns about their day-to-day well-being. So the combination of those 2, we're able to address some of these lower volume, lower speed streets that don't quite have that crash history, but where we know that people feel uncomfortable, and allow MNPD to focus enforcement efforts on the roadways where we know people are dying and being injured.
Thank you. Councilmember Ellis?
Wait till the second round.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go next to Councilmember Druffel.
Thanks, Sharon, and thanks, NDOT, for all you do. That snow clearing was the best I've ever seen, so fantastic job. Truly appreciate it. We were all waiting for the worst, and I think we got the best, so thanks. The question I have is, I'm not sure, my area finds it very popular. Why don't we use speed tables versus these speed bumps? And Bellemead's got a couple, and I was just in Knoxville, they use them, which when you go over, they're very gradual. I wouldn't go over 35 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour. But what I'm finding is going down, and I refer to one we have on Bonds Gap with 8 of them, and it's a pretty busy road. People go 30, 10, 30, 10, and so these speed tables, you can pretty much maintain a consistent speed as you go over them. And so I'm really curious why we don't use them, because in the places I've seen them, they're very effective.
Thanks. Great question. I'm certainly familiar with a phenomenon of drivers getting used to speed cushions and slowing down to, like practically 5 miles per hour as they learn to navigate them. And speed tables certainly are equipped to handle higher speeds. The speed cushions that we use, and we do use 3 different lengths of speed cushion, are intended for the speed that we intend to encourage along a specific street. So again, for a lot of our neighborhood streets, 25 miles per hour, we'll use a speed cushion that is aimed at being able to drive right around 25 miles per hour over. I have had complaints and comments about some speed cushions in the past. I've gone out and personally looked at them, and granted, these have mainly been for new installations. I've gone out personally, driven over them, and have found that they are, as they're specified for, are consistent with the speed that we're trying to create.
But I would say the speed tables are different. They're different. Even I know you have a 14-foot length, but even with a 14-foot length, you still get a pretty decent bump. Versus a speed table is a more gradual approach over, and you really don't get any bump. But you also realize you aren't going to go speed over it, and so I would suggest to you there's a pretty significant difference, and I don't think it's a learning. So you take Vaughn's Gap as between Harding and 100, and there's a lot of people that come and go through there. It's now 6 months in. People still go down to 10 miles an hour. So I really suggest that I think there's a better solution that for especially some of the busier roads, that again, the speed tables really work much better and people are more comfortable. I will tell you in my district, I had a pretty large meeting about 4 or 5 months ago, about 210 attended. Everybody wanted to withdraw their traffic calming because they didn't want the speed bumps. So I don't know how popular they are anymore. I just will tell you that people are more and more concerned. I've gone down a couple other roads also besides Vaughn's Gap where people simply just almost stop at each one of them. And they're pretty busy roads. So I suggest that we maybe take a look at speed tables as an option. And I guess the question goes, why wouldn't we use them since they're pretty convenient?
I don't believe that left one has a button, so it should just be live.
Okay.
You're good to go.
Perfect. All right. So to build on that a little bit, we do use speed tables. We do have some out there off the top of my head. Pennington Bend Road, Whispering Hills, 16th Avenue North. So there are a few. Couple factors come into play there. And I would say, especially if you're at meetings, if that's something you're interested in, definitely encourage the community. But a couple factors that we consider. One, the big advantage of speed cushions as a vertical measure is that they allow vehicles with wide track widths to pass through without having to slow down, and that's fire engines and ambulances. So from our emergency services, we've heard that that's a preference. Additionally, cost just becomes a factor. You know, when you look at the square area that we're putting down, a speed table takes up about as much materials as 4 times that of a speed cushion. So we can certainly install them. It's just fewer in number, but it's certainly on the table to be installed, and it's in our toolbox on the website, and really encourage all council members at meetings, if that's something you're interested in, please help us educate your community and bring those ideas forward.
Good, thank you. And I would suggest that when you make these recommendations, that is put on the table, because I think the people didn't know. But knowing that's an option, I can tell people that, hey, get back into the play here. And don't be too concerned, because there are some options. And they do go to parallel roads, just as you talked about. They go down to Newhoff, go around a very heavy residential, a lot of kids playing in the street. So everybody that was going Vaughn's Gap across now goes all through these neighborhoods. And so it's becoming actually more dangerous from that aspect. But I appreciate everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Up next in the queue, I have Councilmember Evans Siegel. You are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate what Councilmember Horton said and would ask that Metro Legal look into why it is that property owners, but not renters, have a right as to what happens on the street. It was my understanding that once a street was dedicated, it was a public street, and that there was no vested right in the homeowner to the speed that's set, the speed cushion that is there, anything that is within the public right of way. And so I don't understand why a property owner would have greater value than a renter. So I think that's a question we really need Metro Legal to flesh out. I think the other thing I would just, as a follow-up to Councilmember Druffel, I am a 5 mile an hour over speed hump person, but the director recently made a comment that I think is just worth reiterating, which is everybody has their own tolerance for that. And recently I was in my husband's car and he went a full 20 mile an hour over one, and I thought I was about to die, and then I didn't. And it actually turns out they are more comfortable to go over at 20 miles an hour than 5 miles an hour. And so I have changed how I drive over them. Not that anyone should take driving advice from my husband, but that one little nugget was particularly helpful. I think the thing that I hear a lot from a lot of people is we spend a lot of time and a lot of seeming resources that go beyond time, including money, on sort of the design and community process, and they affect the people who live directly adjacent to that street. But it's really all road users that we're trying to make safer. And so I'm just curious, have we ever looked at whether it makes sense to change that process to make it more inclusive when it comes to safety as a whole, and how to sort of speed up that process so that, once you're selected, it can take 2 years sometimes, right, before you see anything. And there's just a lot of frustration in that and how that works.
Yeah, I think a distinction that we've been able to make more clear lately has been the role that the Neighborhood Streets Traffic Calming Program plays in, the goal of this program is increasing quality of life. If there's a glaring safety issue, if there's a pedestrian fatality, it is NDOT's intent and it's our mission to go ahead and, it's not the same opt-in, balloting program. That's sort of a different situation. And so if there's a pressing safety need, we're going to address that as a separate project and do what we need to do to get that done.
Thank you. Yeah. I think I just have one more question, which is, we do use outside consultants for that. Have we ever looked at whether it would be faster or cheaper if we did that in-house, or are we sort of stuck with this outside consultant situation?
I'll take that one. I think you'll have a chance to weigh in on the operating budget that's coming up. We're certainly looking at bringing that in-house. The reality is, very popular program, which is fantastic. That means at our current staffing levels, we need to bring in help. Would love to do that in-house at some point, and maybe the director will back me up on that or go in a different direction.
I'll go to Director Alarcon, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It is two streams of resources that are needed. One is in-house, and we would love to bring it in-house, and that's one of the reasons why we've created this multimodal division within the department that Scott is actually leading for us, so that we can funnel more of these opportunities in-house. And then the second goal is to give Philip the resources so his team can go and actually implement it. So we're not using consultants and contractors, because we have found we can get it done quicker and we can get it done cheaper. And it's just a matter of getting the staff in-house in order to implement that and get it done. So the reason why it was moving so slowly before was we were struggling with a contractor. We actually went a different way, was able to bring on some different contractors through a different avenue, and then we were able to expedite it. That's why you saw a major increase in getting done. But we do feel we can get it done cheaper and faster if we bring more of that resource in-house versus using. So it is part of our budget ask. We will be sharing it with you. I look forward to having that conversation in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Councilmember, anything else? Thank you. Next, I have Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Y'all addressed briefly sort of why things often tend towards the speed humps as opposed to other methodologies that you mentioned. But are there any comparisons that show effectiveness of chicanes and traffic circles versus speed humps? And are they rated?
I don't know how much data NDOT has internally about chicanes or some of the other measures specifically. I think it would be pretty easy for us to pull together radar feedback data. But that's actually something that I think would be great for us to put forward. In the kind of meta comparisons I've looked at, FHWA data, it does seem like for this type of application, speed cushions are, I forgot the exact numbers, but I think they are kind of measurably more effective for this sort of geometry than others are. But I think the director might have something to weigh in.
So we've recently actually installed some traffic circles over in Councilmember Taylor's district as well as in Councilmember Coopin's district, and we are evaluating them. So we can have some more data. We are really trying to get out and experiment with some other things. Chicanes do work, but they are very expensive to install, just to let you know. And when you do the chicanes with the lines on, if you do not put some type of linear, obstacle in front there, the lines do not seem to get followed, I want to say. So we're experimenting with many different things and working with different communities. I know we're working with Councilmember Gregg on some different philosophies altogether. So we are trying to step outside the box. The team was going in the beginning with a lot of the trying to deliver because we were so far behind. Speed cushions were an application we could get done, get quick, get fast, and actually start showing. But we are open to the entire toolbox. So I would say, please bring us what the community wants. We want to hear that. And we are open to sharing what and doing the evaluation based on what the community would like to do.
Thank you. That'd be great to see that data in a year or two or 6 months, whenever we've got enough to know that. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, I have Councilmember Cash. Councilmember Cash, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate all this great information. And I frequently in these meetings that I've been to in my district, 5 or 6 of them maybe, over the years, I ask about the effectiveness of different tools. And first I want to ask, how many streets do we have that have been applied for, but either they haven't gotten anything or it hasn't been determined yet, like what the tool is that we're going to use for them? So like stuff that they voted on and we're just waiting on that. I'm not talking about that, but like about how many are in the queue that we haven't either granted or decided what to do?
With our process there's an application window, 25 are selected within that, and then they go into their design
Yeah, but I mean
process.
total right now. Like we keep a list of all the ones that are like not.
Okay. I think there are 380.
Thank you.
I'm sorry,
356.
Thank you, 356. So I'm going to ask a question or two about one of the other tools or several of the other tools. And I'm not like outright saying, hey, this is what we should do instead, as much as like I hope we have a conversation about it and consider it. Because it really seems like in these meetings that like 90 to 95% of the time, it's like, oh, we're going to do cushions. We're going to do cushions, right? And I even have people bring up other things. And it's like, no, really, cushions are more effective. And I get that cushions are more effective on the street that they're placed on. I guess I'm wondering, and I feel like, and I don't know if this is scientific, but I feel like in the back of my head, I remember getting that speed from a meeting that generally speed cushions are about 80% effective at slowing cars down. And the radar like signs that tell you how fast you're going are more like 50 to 60% effective. Maybe speed cushions slowing down about 7 to 8 miles an hour versus radar signs that are slowing down 4 to 5 miles per hour. I feel like I remember those numbers, generally speaking. And it's going to differ a bit based on the street. But I guess I'm wondering, though, I think that those radar signs are cheaper probably. So I'm just wondering if, since we've got, 356 in the queue, if, I guess what I want to ask is, while I get that the traffic calming cushions are more effective, would we be slowing more cars down if we use, say, the radar signs and we're able to, because they're cheaper, put them on more streets and ultimately slow more cars down on more streets, not on each street necessarily? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's.
I'm wondering if like, and how much more quickly we could get through those 356 and additional applicants. And it seems like it would kind of make more sense with the problem you're talking about if you put them on one street, then if you put the cushions on one street, then you're going to have streets on either side. And that comes up in every meeting. Like,
Yes.
people are there on the street over and say, it's going to put more traffic on our street. Anyway, does my question make sense?
Yes, yeah, it's really clear, and it's something that we have been talking about recently, kind of looking at a way of sort of approaching things in the previous, like, holistic neighborhood approach. Is one thing that we've brought up is, a street that's approved for some sort of vertical measures, whether it's like chicanes that are reinforced with bollards, having the neighborhood streets around it also have radar feedback signs, whether or not they go through the whole application process. That's something that actually came up very recently, and so we're still sort of working out the details, and is something that we'd love y'all's input on. But yeah, I think there's, the radar feedback signs are a really great tool. They're not extremely expensive. And again, the benefit of how they collect data for us is really helpful. And so that's definitely something that we want to expand. And I'm totally in agreement with, your suggestion there. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember. And last in the first round, I've got Councilmember Coopin. Councilmember Coopin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Last but not least, I hope. Appreciate all the insight and information. Really, really helpful. I know this is a very popular program. Couple questions and things. So, am I understanding? I'm trying to understand what from the presentation. Are we potentially moving to a neighborhood look versus a street by street look?
We had been chewing on the pros and cons and what we, could benefit from the neighborhood look. And in our discussions internally in that process, I think what we found as the best of both worlds, and this is something that we want to bring before all of you, is if we get the benefits of doing that from introducing this proximity evaluation, which, again, to clarify, would be an additional point value assigned to streets that are within the neighborhood of a street that has an existing project. We think this would help prevent like a whole slew of streets from getting caught up in balloting if not everyone's on the same page all the time. But the parallel streets concerns can get addressed more rapidly because as soon as there's an initiative, hey, we like a street near us got these wonderful benefits from traffic calming, and now we're kind of seeing the fallout from that. this seems like the right way to kind of balance those different considerations. So I think currently, and any of y'all can chime in, I think we're unlikely to go fully back to the neighborhood-wide process. But if there's, a strong and resounding reason that we ought to look at that, we certainly will.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would love to see, looking at that neighborhood-wide approach, the example that you put up actually was from my neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
But what was nice about it is that it comprehensively addressed the path that people were taking as a cut-through.
Yeah.
Whereas if just one street were indicated, people would have moved over one street, as y'all know. So in my experience, we've been really appreciative of having traffic calming in a couple places. Street by street doesn't necessarily solve the problem. It helps, but sometimes it forces another issue versus a comprehensive look.
If
And I
I
would say
may,
that-
if I may, I'm sorry, Scott, I didn't mean to cut you off, but if I may real quick, just to clarify, we are adding that, for example, if we have actually already done a traffic calming, our street is selected for traffic calming, and we know that there's going to be overflow into another street, because I always say traffic is like water. It's going to find a way to move, and it's going to find the least impactful way of moving. And so if your street is now impacted and everybody's using it for a cut through, and as you had mentioned, Councilmember Druffel, you had a neighborhood actually do traffic calming and it did move to another street and now that's impacted, we would then recommend that we look at the more broad. But if we know there's no way for the traffic to move over to another street, we would stay on that one street. We had less of an opportunity to provide traffic calming when we did a more neighborhood approach, because right now I live on this street and I have no traffic problem, but I live on this street and I have all the traffic problem. Well, that's your problem. I'm good. And so when we do the balloting, it would fail. So we need to find a way to have a better conversation with the neighborhood that, okay, but you'll be next. They're either going to go this way or they're going to go that way. And then when we fix this, it's going to go this way. So we might as well talk about what is that fix for the neighborhood as a whole to improve the quality of life for all of our neighbors and not just one street or two streets or three streets. So we are recommending that we add that as part of our prioritization of where we're looking at that. So that was one of the things we wanted to add, and we will be adding. So when we're evaluating, we're going to add, does it already have a traffic calming, or is it being considered for a traffic calming? And do we need to look at additional because we know the traffic's going to move? So that is being considered and recommended to be added as part of our prioritization as we move forward. Sorry, just wanted to share that.
No, you said exactly what I was going to say, with the one addition that the speed feedback signs will kind of help give us this preemptive approach where we can collect this data after implementing a traffic calming project and come back to you as the council member and say, hey, have you heard anything back from street B? And this is the data that we're seeing. Are you getting complaints about speeding? Anything new where it wasn't existing at, last year at this time? And so we could already come up with sort of a plan and get that process started early. And that way, if someone does come to you guys, the ball's already rolling. We can get across the finish line a lot faster.
Appreciate that. Speaking of the balloting process and kind of echoing what some of my colleagues have said, and I'm all for community feedback. I really appreciate the insight of the local communities. When we do SPs and things like that, we of course listen to our communities, but ultimately for an SP, for example, we as the council members are that final arbiter of what we file or don't file. In my experience with a number of NDOT public right-of-way initiatives, be it bike lanes or traffic circles or whatnot, those are kind of looked at, community feedback's listened to, and then y'all come out with a plan and it kind of happens. What's the drive with traffic calming to have balloting where we don't really see balloting appear in any other improvement that NDOT does?
I would say it is because it's a quality of life issue. So it's really up to, up to the community whether they want it or not. I mean, if it's something that's not a safety concern, then it really is just a quality of life and something that we feel that should be put to a vote. That being said, like Director Alicorn said, if it is a safety concern, we move forward with it.
And I will just share real quick, Councilmember, what we have done within the department, because we do have other areas where we do balloting to make sure it is what the community, a majority of the community wants. We have set it so they're all equal. So we do residential parking permits as a balloting measure. Again, just making sure this is an overall want from the community and not just a few folks. Because unfortunately, past experience, we've gone and put things down and we've had to rip it up. And so it helps us just to make sure and solidify that this and truly is an initiative the community as a whole wants. So I would ask that we keep it. If you do feel like you're still having issues with it, please come talk to us. But we've been having really good success with the balloting passing. And I would say if we start going backwards, by all means, we would, but it's starting to work really well now.
Appreciate that. How often does the balloting pass versus fail? Approximately.
I may have to look back into our numbers. I know like total number of votes is 80% pass among all of our projects, but I can't speak to, like discrete like project passes at this moment, but I can look into that.
Sure, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the balloting being one way to get neighborhood feedback. I think that I would ask maybe taking a look at other ways that might, again, incorporate renters. And I think there's a way to get a pulse from community meetings and talking to people. And I know that balloting process can take some time. And so, and obviously, sometimes I hear that the people in the street are voting, but the rest of the neighborhood's driving down that street every day and has no voice in that matter. So a community engagement versus ballot might be interesting. Just one last question, Chair. Sorry, I know we're running on time. Has there been looking at, I think you might have mentioned it, but giving points for length of time on the list and or going to a community and saying, hey, you're number 385 on this list. You've been 385 or lower for the last couple of years. You're not going to make it. And on the flip side of that, I've had streets that were, 27 out of, didn't make the 25 and then dropped in the list the next year. So has there been consideration to kind of taking that into account?
Derek, I don't know if you're able to speak to if that's come up in the past, like if we've sorted that out before, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak to that a little bit. So I do agree that one of the most frustrating things for neighborhoods is when they just miss that cutoff. The next year, we have 100 new streets come in, a lot of new data, and they fall back further. And this was a discussion in the early years of the program, but ultimately, we wanted the data to speak for itself, not necessarily prioritize those programs, especially in the early years where neighbors knew of it first, were able to apply. And then as far as the bottom of the list, that is also another potential improvement we've been discussing, because to your point, we have some neighborhoods that apply, they're last on the list, never had a crash, average speeds are 16 miles an hour. Probably not a street that needs a heavy intervention. So what we're discussing is developing essentially a cutoff line, and below that, directing them to other programs we have, such as tactical urbanism, beautification, things of that nature, where you're still getting that quality of life placemaking feel, but maybe not the intervention designed to slow down speeding vehicles if they're, I don't want to say non-existent, but if it's more of a perception issue than actual data.
And Councilmember, I might add, you could always, fund more of an opportunity to do more traffic calming. So,
I tried.
So there is that opportunity to actually fund that particular program with more. Currently, it's funded with $4 million through the capital spending plan. If there's an opportunity to consider funding more, then we would have the chance to actually maybe instead of doing 25, maybe doing 30. But right now, 25 seems to be that magical number. And that may vary too, depending on which direction we move in of actually doing more different type, because there is a cost associated with the different type of traffic calming we put into play.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I've had Councilmembers Gamble and Ellis seek to get in the queue. We're getting very short on time, but we're going to continue this discussion for a few more minutes. We'll try to get everybody in. I had just a few really brief questions. One was kind of just stressed by the director. The budget ask that y'all are going to be bringing before us for in-house staff. Do you think that would potentially allow us to do more than 50 awards a year, or is this really just going to make the process more efficient, or how are you seeing that?
I do think it'll allow us to put more emphasis on doing more than just for one, it'll allow us to take consideration in different type of programs. I want to say what's in the toolbox available. Sometimes we may lean toward a speed cushion because it is going to be most efficient, but it's also most cost effective. Yet the community may really drive wanting something else. And there is some time limitation in dollars to do that. So that's going to allow us to really be able to take that bigger box idea. It'll also allow us to do more because, as I said earlier, we have found we can do it quicker and we can do it cheaper if we bring it in-house. So if that opportunity does arise through the budget process, then we would actually be able, I feel, to get more than 50 out a year.
Thank you. And I know that we had a presentation from NDOT staff about complete streets and kind of what we're doing routinely as we look at repaving and whatnot. But could folks give us, from NDOT, give us just a very brief explanation of kind of what we're doing as a routine matter when we look at repaving a street? Are we looking at lane widths? Are we looking at things that are going to contribute to an overall safer environment that are not necessarily part of the traffic calming program? But where are we at in the paving scheduling and coordination with looking at potential improvements? And if you could just briefly speak to that, please.
Scott, you want to take that one?
Sure. So sort of the first thing that we look at is any additional improvements that we could make, whether bikeway, sidewalk, anything that we can coordinate with that paving project. It certainly makes it cheaper on our program side to piggyback onto the paving initiative, but also striping, any kind of vertical measures like bollards or anything to put in alongside a bikeway to make that safer.
Is there a place where council members can view the paving schedule? I know the 1 year out is easy to find, but is there a place folks can look at the 5 year to kind of begin thinking and having their community take a look at that?
If I can take that question, Mr. Chair. Actually, we usually have in the past done year after year, 1 year at a time. We're now actually looking at a 5-year program. So we will be making that available on the website. Know that there is an opportunity for change because, for example, now that Chime is alive, we have an opportunity that if we're going to do a road pavement and we're going to do Chime, but maybe Chime projects 2 years down the road, we might move that pavement project down so that we can collaborate better, really look through the Vision Zero and complete street lens so that we're maximizing the effort on that particular street for safety and for quality of life improvements for all modes.
Thank you, Director. And just a quick jargon giraffe, Chime is Choose How You Move.
Excuse me. Yes, thank you.
Program that was successful in November. Lastly, one of the ideas that we've had a little bit of discussion about here for improvements is removing those bottom 25 streets or doing something to address applications that are not likely to be accepted into this program. And I just want to give some feedback. I think that's a really good idea. I think that neighbors who are looking for these quality of life improvements, if it's really not viable for them to get their street accepted into this program, I think it's better to tell them that, inform them of these other opportunities, as y'all said, of tactical urbanism, beautification, that might be able to, if they can lean into those and cooperate with their council member, there might be some paths forward for them that are not necessarily this project. I saw Director Alarcon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, we also just put a playbook together so that slow streets could be reconsidered for a community where up to a year they could actually look at doing some temporary improvements on an entire street to try to slow the traffic down. So there's many programs that we've recently added in the past 6 months that could be considered for those streets that are just never going to bubble up to the top. And we look forward to identifying those and then working with those neighbors so that we can actually maybe apply some of these solutions. So thank you.
Thank you, Director. And I've got Council Members Gamble and Ellis in the queue, and I just want to ask, we are bumping up against really needing to get to our regular business, so I apologize, but I'll have to ask everyone to be as brief as possible. But I will go to Council Member Gamble. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me as I'm not on this committee. I have a really brief comment. I just want to say I appreciate the discussion today and the ideas for improvement. I will say that over the past 4 years, I've had about 6 or 7 traffic calming projects in my district. And what I've noticed over the last 4 years are a lot of improvements have been made to the traffic calming program already. There's a lot of community engagement. I appreciate the voting process has changed for the better as well. And there seems to be more equity equity in how these projects are selected, and I appreciate that. So I just want to make that comment and also say, as we're making more improvements, there's always room for improvement. Just want to make sure that we are continuing to audit to make sure that there's equity in how these projects are being selected. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Lastly, we have Councilmember Ellis. I'm sorry, it's not letting me. I think I have too many mics on. Give me 1 second. All right, you're recognized.
Thank you. I'll be really quick. The firefighters in my district would be really mad if I did not bring up that since nearly 80% increase in traffic calming has happened over the last year, check in with them to see what the impact, be it positive or negative, this influx in speed bumps, humps has on them, please. So the question that I had was that I got the 356 number. It was the first half of last year. I was talking with 556.
It's actually 566.
I knew it was close. Sorry, I'm not a Rain Man, but when I was talking with Mr. Purvis, who's wonderful there, the council liaison, I had the question about the application process. So when they apply, if we're not tracking the date that they applied for the application, a part of the program, as it reads online, is that every 2 years, they're able to reapply. And so I was going back, following up with people, letting them know how long it had been and where they were ranked on the list. But some of those application dates, they didn't have, or they told me that they were inaccurate once we did pull those up. So could you sort of square those two discrepancies?
Yeah, I think I can take that one. So one, our records should be pretty good. We track them during application period. We do occasionally get multiple applications for the same street, potentially years apart. But if you do have specific ones where you're questioning, when did this come in, please reach out to us. We're happy to track that down and answer. And as far as the 2-year roll-off, you are correct. We did write that into our internal policy. We have not executed that yet at this time. I think that was something that was adopted about 18 months ago. And that's, I think another piece of what we're talking about with, transitioning those lower scoring projects to different programs that may be appropriate. Yep, so I think we'd love to hear feedback on that 2-year application.
So when this upcoming traffic calming program opening comes, should I base it off of 2 years of the last application on file, or is that still a thing? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yep, so far we have not rolled anyone off yet over that 2-year window.
Okay.
Yep, and I think that's a conversation that we need to continue to have internally, what we're going to do moving forward there. But we'll certainly get back to everyone prior to the next application window.
Just let me know. Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I'm going to have to conclude the traffic calming discussion there so we can get to our regular agenda items. I want to thank the team from NDOT as well as the director for coming out here today and talking with us about this program that we know there's a ton of interest from our constituents about and that we get a lot of questions about and try to do our best to support. So thank you all again for coming out here this afternoon. All right, so at the beginning of the meeting, I asked if folks had any items that they wish to pull from the consent agenda. Councilmember Evan Siegel asked to pull committee item 5, that's RS 2023-1023 by Porterfield and Parker. Does anyone else anticipate requesting items to be pulled from consent for discussion, questions, comments, anything of that nature? Okay, seeing none, so I'm going to go in and read all of our captions, and then I'll ask for I'll ask again if anybody needs to pull any items, and then we'll have a motion on the consent agenda, and then we'll move on to our item or items for discussion. All right, so first on the proposed consent agenda is committee item 1. This is RS 2025-1019, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County by and through the Nashville Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure and the state of Tennessee by and through its Commissioner of Transportation for the installation, operation, and maintenance of transportation ART on the south side of Mulberry Street along an I-40 overpass solid retaining wall. Committee item 2, this is RS 2025 1020 by Coop Gamble and Parker, the resolution authorizing Nashville Urban Partners 2006 LLC to construct, install, and maintain aerial encroachments at 905 Gleaves Street. Committee item 3, this is RS 2025-1021 by Coop Gamble and Parker. This is a resolution authorizing Mel's Drive-In to construct, install, and maintain aerial encroachments at 148 2nd Avenue North. Committee item 4, this is RS 2025-1022, a resolution by Webb, Porterfield, Gamble, and Parker. This is a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through Metro Water Services, to enter into a construction agreement with CSX Transportation Incorporated to construct or cause to be constructed wastewater treatment plant improvements and expansion for property located at 61 Edenwald Road. Committee item 6, this is RS 2024-1024, a resolution by Gamble and Parker, a resolution to amend ordinance number BL 2024-632 to authorize the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept additional sanitary sewer main and sanitary sewer manhole and to update map and parcel information for now 2 properties located at 251 and 227 Nesbitt Lane. Committee item 7, this is RS 2025-1025 by Kimbrough, Gamble, and Parker. This is a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept 1 new fire hydrant assembly for property located at 4040 Jordonia Station Road, also known as Siskin Steel Building Expansion. Committee item 8, this is RS 2025-1026 by Coop Gamble and Parker. This is a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept new public sanitary sewer manhole and the vertical adjustment of existing sanitary sewer manhole for property located at 1010 Broadway, also known as Yards Landing Development. Committee item 9, this is RS 2025-1027, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept new public sanitary sewer manhole for property located at 728B Due West Avenue North, also known as Madison Place, and that is sponsored by Gamble and Parker. Committee item 10, this is RS 2025-1028 by Toombs, Gamble, and Parker. This is a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept new public sanitary sewer main and sanitary sewer manhole for property located at 2409 18th Avenue North. Committee item 11, this is RS 2025-1029 by Gamble and Parker, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept new public water and sanitary sewer mains, fire hydrant assemblies, and sanitary sewer manholes for property located at 3834 Pinhook Road, also known as Pinhook Ridge. Committee item 12, this is BL 2025-695 by Porterfield, Gadd, and others, an ordinance approving a greenway conservation easement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County through the Metropolitan Board of Parks and Recreation and 1231 Pawnee Trail LLC for greenway improvements at 1231 Pawnee Trail, Madison, Tennessee. Committee item 13, this is BL 2025-696 by Horton, Porterfield, and others, a resolution approving a greenway conservation easement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County through the Metropolitan Board of Parks and Recreation and Nations Owner LLC for greenway improvements at 1710 54th Avenue North. Committee item 14, this is BL 2025-697 by Spain, Porterfield, and others, an ordinance approving a greenway conservation easement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County through the Metropolitan Board of Parks and Recreation and Highway 100 Investment Partners for greenway improvements at 8033 Highway 100. Committee item 15, this is BL 2025-698 by Greg Porterfield and others. This is an ordinance approving a greenway conservation easement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County through the Metropolitan Board of Parks and Recreation and MI Homes of Nashville LLC for greenway improvements at 2600 Pennington Bend Road, aka 0 Pennington Bend Road. Committee item 16, this is BL 2025-699 by Gamble and Parker. This is an ordinance authorizing the abandonment of unnamed right-of-way between 1321 Pawnee Trail and 1327 Pawnee Trail. Committee item 17, this is BL 2025-700. This is by Gamble and Parker. It's an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to acquire permanent and temporary easements through negotiation, condemnation, and acceptance for the Lanier Drive Stormwater Improvement Project for 5 properties located on Lanier Drive and Forest Park Road. Committee item 18, this is BL 2025-701 by Gamble and Parker. This is an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept new public water and sanitary sewer mains, fire hydrant assemblies, sanitary sewer manholes, and easements for 2 properties located at 2122 and 2204 Elliott Avenue. Committee item 19, this is BL 2025-702 by Gamble and Parker. This is an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to abandon sanitary sewer main, sanitary sewer manhole, and easement for property located at 2000 Ava Place and Addie Way in Nolensville. Also known as Nolensville FSER. All right, having heard the items for the proposed consent agenda, does anyone have any other items besides number 5 that they would like to remove for discussion, questions, comments, anything of that nature? All right, seeing none, if we could get a motion and a second on the proposed consent agenda, please. All right, properly moved and seconded. Any discussion on the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll go to a vote on the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any not voting? Is it still 10? All right, recommend approval of the consent items, 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting, and we will go back to our single item for discussion. This is Committee Item 5. This is RS 2025-1023. This is a resolution approving a contract change to a state water infrastructure program grant from the state of Tennessee, Department of Environment and Conservation to the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Metropolitan Nashville Water and Sewerage Services Department to modernize and upgrade the Dry Creek Water Reclamation Facility. And this is sponsored by Porterfield and Parker. Could we get a motion, please? All right, properly moved and seconded, and I will go straight to Councilmember Evans Siegel. Do you have any questions, comments, discussion on this one?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if the department could explain the change. I was trying to understand it and wasn't clear.
Do we have anyone from Water here who can address the changes in this? My apologies. You're recognized. If you'd please introduce yourself.
Good evening. I'm Mary Peoples, Metro Water Services. I have Aaron Thomas here, who is a project engineer for Dry Creek Reclamation Facility, and he will be able to address your question.
Thank you. So just so I understand the question, the reason is, why are we changing our contract with the state? Is that correct?
Well, yes, and I guess specifically, why is it costing so much less?
Great question. So when we originally applied for this grant, I believe, on that document, it says 164 million. That was in the preliminary stages of design. So then we went, got 100% designs, got a contractor, realized what the actual cost was and the schedule, realized that could not meet the deadline requirements for that grant. So then we phased the project. So we took a phase 1. That is everything that will meet the grant funding deadline. Phase 2 is happening concurrently, but then is not tied to the grant funding. So 100% of the project is still moving forward. We're still receiving the same amount of funding. It was just a shuffling around due to long lead items, as well as a schedule and actual contractor cost.
Anything else, Councilmember? Okay, thank you for that explanation. Any other discussion on Committee Item 5 on RS 2023-1023? All right, I'm seeing none. I'll ask that we go to a vote. All those in favor of 1023, please say aye. Any opposed? Any not voting? All right, recommend approval, 10 in favor, 0 against, and 0 not voting. I have one brief announcement, and then we will get out of the way for planning to get going here. You probably received an email invitation from Walk Bike Nashville. We've got the 8th Annual Pedestrian Memorial Service coming up on February 22nd. It's going to be held at noon on Saturday, the 22nd, once again at Trinity Community Commons in District 5. I would love to extend an invitation to all colleagues to attend this important event as we commemorate neighbors that we've lost in the year of 2024 to pedestrian crashes. So please look out for that email, and we'd hope to see you there. And I believe that's it for our business today. We will finish just on time and make way for the Planning Committee.